A recurring phrase in Genesis chapter 1 is, God saw that it was good. As the process of assembling the disordered blob of matter progresses, God takes these little steps back to evaluate his work, and it's getting better and better. But God's evaluation changes at the end of chapter 1, when everything is finished. There it says, God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. It's not just good anymore, it's perfect. There's no more room for improvement, no big changes or little tweaks that could possibly make it better. And the very best part was humanity. Adam and Eve were the crown of God's creation. God created it all for them, and he entrusted it all to them to take care of. All that is about to change in Genesis chapter 3. God's perfect creation is about to fall, and it's all humanity's fault. Before we dive in, an overview of the main characters. There are 4 main characters in this chapter. The serpent, who we know is the devil, Adam, Eve, and God. We're going to learn so much about how each of them operates. Genesis 3 recounts an actual historical event, but the storyline has repeated countless times since. So let's dive in. Now the serpent was more crafty than any of the wild animals the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" The first temptation begins with a question. The serpent says, "Did God really say?" From now on, I'm just going to refer to the serpent as the devil. So why does the devil ask that question? Do you think he's looking for information, or do you think he's trying to make a point? He knows the answer, what God really said. It's called a rhetorical question. Its purpose isn't to gather information. Its purpose is to make a point. The devil is seeking to paint God as evil, to plant the idea in Eve's mind that God is trying to withhold good things. Remember what God had actually said. You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God had literally just given Adam and Eve the world, and here the devil comes along and plants the idea that God is holding back. Let's see how Eve responds. The woman said to the serpent, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die." She sets the record straight, at least. It was only that one tree that God said not to eat from, but she's still playing into the devil's hand by continuing the conversation. If a talking serpent wasn't enough of a clue that there was something amiss here, even then, his implication that God was evil still should have been enough to prompt Eve to walk away from the conversation. Instead of running away from temptation, she decides to entertain it. Some people criticize Eve's comment about God saying, "You must not touch it," that she was adding an element to God's prohibition. I'm not too quick to pass judgment on that. Remember that God hadn't yet created Eve when he first told Adam not to eat from the tree. Maybe God had repeated the command a second time after he created Eve and included the bit about not touching it. We just don't know. So far, the devil's temptation has consisted simply of a question, a deceptive question. But now he moves up onto a straight-up lie. "You will not surely die," the serpent said to the woman. "For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." What he had implied before through a question, he now declares with a statement. God is lying to you, Eve. He's trying to keep good things from you by means of empty threats. God doesn't want you to be like him. There's lots of irony in this chapter. The irony of this statement is that, Adam and Eve were already like God. God had a whole conversation with himself about it in chapter 1. Let us make man in our image, in our likeness. What the devil promises them, it's the very thing he's seeking to steal from them. Verses 6 and 7. When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked, so they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. The dilemma for Adam and Eve boiled down to this. Who are they going to believe? God and the devil were telling them two different things. Were they going to go with God or the serpent? Verse 6 gives us some insight into Eve's reasoning. She wants to do it. She just needs to justify her action. So she convinces herself by deciding, well, number one, it's good for food. No, it's healthy. Number two, it's pleasing to the eye. It's beautiful. And number three, it's desirable for gaining wisdom. It's going to make me more like God. Never mind that God had said, don't, and you'll surely die if you do. She didn't believe God anymore. She had gone over to the serpent's side. And she's not the only one. We suddenly find out where Adam was this whole time. He was with her. And when he heard the devil painting God in an evil light, you didn't hear Adam say, hey, Eve, I think we should leave. Adam's fully informed and he's fully complicit in the crime. The devil had told them their eyes would be opened. And more irony, in an instant, that's exactly what happens, just not in the glorious way that they expected. Their eyes were opened, and they were instantly filled with shame, and they started diving for fig leaves. It's not because that up to this point they thought they were wearing clothes. It's that they were perfectly comfortable being completely exposed to one another. Now they were ashamed and distrustful and felt a need to hide, even though they were husband and wife. And not only hide from one another, but hide from God. Verse 8. Then the man and his wife heard the sound of the Lord God as he was walking in the garden in the cool of the day, and they hid from the Lord God among the trees of the garden. Something has changed about Adam and Eve. In the midst of their shame, they hear God coming. God is spirit, of course, but somehow he was making his presence known. If there hadn't been a profound change in Adam and Eve, then you might expect that when they heard God, they would have run over to him. Oh, God, we're so glad you're here. There was this serpent, and he tricked us. And remember that tree you told us not to eat from? Well, anyway, God, we're so glad you're here because you're the only one who can fix this. But that's not what they do, because they had changed. When they hear God, their first thought is, hey, maybe if I hide behind this tree, he won't see me. As if you can hide from God. But they were willing to try, because as soon as they had gone over to the devil's side, they saw God the same way the devil did, as the enemy. Earlier, the devil had used a rhetorical question. Now God does. Verses 9 through 11. But the Lord God called to the man, "Where are you?" He answered, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." And he said, "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" So God didn't need information on where Adam was and whether he had eaten from the tree. God makes these questions to make a point. As Adam answers them, Adam is forced to verbalize what's going on in his head and his heart. As he hears his own words, it's got to register with Adam, what's happened to me? Why am I hiding from God? Why am I ashamed? God asks the questions to show Adam how far he's fallen. It becomes super clear in verse 12 when Adam responds to God's question about eating from the tree. The man said, "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree and I ate it." Just like the purpose of God's question was to make a point, so is the purpose of Adam's answer. He doesn't deny what he did, but he passes the blame by pointing the finger. But pay attention who he's pointing his finger at. Not simply the woman, but the woman you put here with me, God. So first, Adam is scared and stupid enough to try to hide from God. Now Adam is bold and stupid enough to try to shift the blame onto God. Adam doesn't seem to be happy with the way that this is turning out, but he's definitely not showing any regret for what he did. He's just sorry he got caught. Next, God talks to Eve. Then the Lord God said to the woman, "What is this you have done?" The woman said, "The serpent deceived me and I ate." More finger pointing. She's doing the same thing as her husband. He pointed his finger at her. She points hers at the serpent. So the devil made me do it. Her response makes me wonder if she's also pointing her finger at God like Adam did, insinuating, where did that serpent come from anyway, God? At the beginning of this video, I introduced the four main characters of Genesis chapter 3 and said that this chapter teaches so much about how each one of them operates. What can we say about the devil? He's evil, but he doesn't present himself that way. He plays the friend. You catch more flies with honey than vinegar. He paints God as the enemy. He uses sweet-sounding lies. His goal is to separate people from God. After reading this, what can we say about humans? Easy prey for the devil's sweet-sounding lies. Once we set our hearts on something evil, it's pretty easy for us to rationalize doing it in our minds. Like Eve, good for food, pleasing to the eye, also desirable for gaining wisdom. And then there's the finger pointing. We're pretty good at finding somebody else to blame. It comes so easily to Adam and Eve. And notice, they aren't only shifting the blame. They disobeyed, but they present themselves as victims. Adam is Eve's victim, and God's too. Eve is the devil's victim, and maybe even she's saying she's God's victim too. Notice how far Adam and Eve have fallen since the end of chapter 1, when God saw all that he had made and it was very good. Since the end of chapter 2, when God presented Eve to Adam and their marriage was perfect. They've turned against God and sided with the enemy. They've turned on each other and declared themselves victims. They're full of shame and fear and anger, and they aren't even sorry. In the second half of the chapter, we'll see what God does about this. There we see what God is like.